Well, hello and welcome to Frank's World TV, I guess live streamed live. Um, that little intro is something that I created not that long ago. But for today, I'm going to premiere a new intro that I have, which is let me put the overlay, chat overlay there. And you can check out the new Frank's World intro that I put together for not celebrating the 20th anniversary of the blog. I'll get into that in a minute. I think I started a little early, but let me want to say thank you for tuning in if you're watching this live, and thank you for watching it on the replay. I really appreciate it. And I'm excited because it was 20 years ago today. Let me reach over and get my my Monster Energy drink that I launched franksworld.com as a technology blog. Now, if you've been paying attention long enough, franksworld.com has existed since 1995. And I am planning to do a podcast limited run series on the history of the web and kind of how I experience with it. Because I've been fortunate enough to be in the right place at the right time sometimes, and not in the wrong place at the right time sometimes. And it's been an interesting journey. The blog itself really started off as an attempt to get noticed and get involved deeply in the .NET community, which at that time in 2004 was still very much in its infancy. I had been blessed to be living not that far from a very active user group, the North Jersey .NET user group, which I have to see if they're still active today. I actually had the privilege a couple of years after getting started in the community of speaking to the community on tablet PCs. Yes, tablet PCs. So if you will indulge me, I hang on. All right, so if you'll indulge me, I will play the new intro. All right. So with that out of the way, I will let me turn up the chat because I need a little bit more screen real estate. Let's go to captions, turn that off. And yes, I see in the comments, I do need to get smart on OBS and get more comfortable with OBS. All right, so this is the site as of today. And it's been a long, strange trip to get here. It's something that I've been very proud of. And the first thing you're going to look in the site is going to look at the archives. Right? You'll notice two things in those. One, Frank, you blog a heck of a lot. What's the deal? And maybe we'll have a special guest today. Who knows? Hang on. All right. It never fails. I get IMs and beeps and blinks whenever as soon as I hit the go live. All right. So, and you'll notice a couple things, right? One, I blog quite a bit. You'll notice that, hey, wow, like 107 blog posts for this month, 118 for last one. November was the record, in case you're wondering, 229. And the minimum I've had over the years is 1. So if you look in that drop-down list, you'll see that it really kind of, hey, it stops in September of 2017. What happened, Frank? I thought you said you were doing this for 20 years. You're scamming me. That's what you're thinking. But no, that's not what happened. So what happened was in 2017, I was using Azure, and Azure had not yet had a native MySQL instance. This this is the challenge of technology over time. So they didn't have a native solution for it. So they ran it out, they outsourced it to a company called ClearDB. Now, because I had a certain amount of Azure credits, I had a free account on ClearDB, right? I can run, I think, one or two instances of a MySQL database. Well, there was some kind of accounting glitch on their end, and it turns out that they decided that they were going to end my account for non-payment. So when I filed the Azure support ticket, the Microsoft people were very friendly. The ClearDB people were not as friendly, and they basically told me, "No, your stuff's deleted." I'm like, "What do you mean it's deleted? It's in the cloud, right?" No, 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 we delete everything. And they looked for backups, but I'll never know how hard they looked for the backups. And so at the end of the day, I was really mad. I used a lot of foul language. I'm not gonna lie about that one. We actually recorded a podcast about it while it was raw, because I figured this is something that I think people are going to encounter or have already encountered when they lose data. Um, uh, do you know where your data is? There we go. This was the episode we recorded. Obviously, the Hindenburg was kind of a disaster. They had thoroughly deleted everything I had built up from 2004 to 2017. 13 years, maybe that's the number, I don't know. 13 years of data gone through no fault of my own, right? I was using a free account. I was being charged for non-payment of a free account. It's absurd, but I had to deal with it. So I kind of had my moments like, well, what can I do? Can I go to the Wayback Machine? We'll see the Wayback Machine in a minute. Do I go back to the Wayback Machine? Do I fix it? Do I kind of scrape that? Do I have backups? And it turns out I did have some backups, which oddly enough, I was able to find a backup, but I still had a 4-year gap. And then I kind of realized most of the stuff I was blogging about from 2004 to about 2013, 14 was about Silverlight, was about WPF, was about Windows Phone, right? All these technologies that no one really cared about anymore. And yeah, I know that there was some other stuff mixed in there too. There was some sentimental things. I had written a long thing when my dad died. I had written another thing when my book came out, when my son was born. Just kind of those things that, those I have backups of. But ultimately I decided to I leaned into it and I was like, well, you know what? Let me rethink what the blog is going to be about, because at the time I was switching into data science and artificial intelligence. And it was definitely clearly a smarter move than writing for Silverlight. But ultimately, we turned that tragedy into content, and it also became a cautionary tale for a lot of people to be very cognizant of their data, take responsibility for your own data backups. And it it was a lesson I learned very painfully. And you can't just rely on the cloud, because a simple billing glitch could just wipe out everything you have, and you would be up a certain type of creek without a paddle. So with that in mind, I kind of set out a new goal to rebuild the blog bigger, better, faster, and stronger. And part of that was taking this data that I have, because I'm a data nerd, and as a data nerd, I had tracked all my blog posts going back to the beginning, basically from February 2004. That month, I had 14 posts. The following month, 44, then 16, then 27, then 41, blah, 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 blah. I've actually made this available as a CSV for an example of a data science project that had a slice and dice data back when I was writing for MSDN magazine. But fortunately, I had this data already saved, right? And I have this metric here that I track, posts per day, right? So, which is basically this number divided by that number. And so I basically did that, and then it was actually here, and I actually, of course, I graphed this because again, data nerd. I graphed this over time, and you'll see that I had been consistent. Now, not always a lot of consistent, but I really had this magic insight of, you know what? I've been good at the discipline of blogging on a regular basis. Some months in the early days, was 15, 20. I tried to get for about one post per day. That was generally my target. And you see, I did for the most part kind of hit that. There were some months where I did just one post. Um, but I kept at it. And that's something that I think I'm very proud of personally. And I'm even more proud of myself. I know it's a bit, it, it, it may be a bit gratuitous, right, to say that, but I'm proud of myself for rebooting the blog. So if you look at the great deletion happened, let's see, where was it? Right around here, actually. Um, this is when the great deletion happened. So while I did lose a fair bit of content, oops, let me, there we go. No, there we go. And so I did lose a fair bit of content, but if you look at the latter half of that, I've been able to rebuild. And ladies and gentlemen, and assorted bots and artificial intelligences that are out there in the multiverse, today I have a special guest, and you're probably not going to be too surprised at who this special guest is. But welcome, my brother from another mother, Andy Leonard. How's it going, Andy?
Hey Frank, how you doing?
I'm doing all right. I'm doing all right. Um, I was like, "Are you in the basement or something?" Then I realized you had a green screen.
Yeah,
So I was just briefing folks that today is the 20th anniversary of when I started my blog.
no way.
Way.
Well, here's an interesting tidbit to go along with that.
Hmm.
Today is also Stevie Ray's 21st birthday.
No way.
So you started it on his first birthday. How's
That's
that?
right. That's right.
That's easy to remember.
That is easy to remember. Well, happy birthday to your eldest son.
Yep.
And yeah, so I was just refreshing folks with the great Hindenburg disaster that is ClearDB.
Oh,
Um,
yeah, that was bad.
13 years of data gone in an instant.
Yeah,
And if nothing else, you could take the lemons and turn lemonade in it. And one of the things that I'm very proud of,
sure.
I can say, at the risk of sounding like an arrogant putz. Um,
I don't think you could sound like that, Frank.
well, thank you. There are many people who would disagree with you, but I appreciate it. If you look here, right, this is where the great disaster happened. And if you notice that the number of blog posts from this point forward, I've actually increased it. And because I'm a data nerd, I tracked all these statistics and whatnot. And I've calculated the max, the min, the mean, the mode, the median, right? Standard
Hmm.
deviation. um, but one of the things that I'm very proud of is I set out a goal to replace this 13 years in terms of volume, in terms of the content. I set a
Yeah,
goal to do that 13 years in 5 or less. Turns out I did it in about 4 years and 10 months.
nice.
And the only way to do that was to accelerate how often I produce blog posts. So um, basically now this is my tracking of before and after. So the amount of stuff that I've lost now only accounts for about 40% or less of my entire blog production ever.
Excellent.
So I hit the 50-50 mark. Gosh, I forget exactly when it was. It might have been about a year or two ago. It was in February. And I'm very proud of that I didn't just give up because the temptation was very real to give
Yeah,
up. And I think I was texting with you like, oh my God, it's all gone.
yeah.
And you were there for me. So I want to publicly say thank you to that.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think you managed it better than many would have. I mean,
Right.
it's so give yourself some credit.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
I was there being your friend, hanging out with you, and I was mourning with you. It was grief. I mean, it was a lot.
And you had asked the first question of like, you had asked the first question. Wait, is it in the cloud? How can it all be deleted? That doesn't make any sense, right?
Yeah,
So I like to think of it as a cautionary tale for others that just because it's in the
definitely so.
cloud doesn't mean that they have your best interest in mind. And a billing glitch. I mean, I got canceled for non-payment of a free account, which is the most ridiculous thing I could think of.
Right?
And yeah. So
But they made up for it by deleting the backups. Sorry.
no, like
that's the part that got me. I was like, you did what?
all the backups. All the
All
backups. I mean, I was just so impressed with their thoroughness, right? Like I was trying to put a positive spin on it. I was like, well,
Yeah.
at least they were thorough in their destruction. So now I want to go back in time, back to February 2004, not 2020, which was 20 years ago, which is pretty disturbing to think about. But but this is the actual first blog. And the first blog post says, Frank's blog lives again. Oh, come on. So fortunately to the Wayback Machine, I can access all of these old copies of stuff.
Nice.
And it basically says, I've just installed the .text blogging program after work on some magic on some config files. So when I said lives again, you're like, wait a minute. So it turns out I actually did have a blog of sorts on Blogger that I started in like 1999, actually, but I wasn't consistent with it. But
yeah,
I also use server-side includes and weird hacks to get it to go from the Blogger site onto franksworld.com. So you can kind of see like some of my old travel logs, like when I went somewhere, I'd post pictures, I'd share that sort of thing. Because I was living in Europe at the time for a big chunk of that. And then, 9/11 happened. My life turns upside down. That's a story for another day. But I was committed to getting a blog again. And this is about the time I discovered the .NET community. And big shout out to Don Densack, Miguel Castro, Stacy Urig, I want to say, as well as Scott Watermasick, who created the .text blog engine. So the .text blog engine was a blog engine written in .NET. And it actually ultimately was, let's see if we click on the powered by. It was a free open source project that you could build and run your own blogs on. And here we go. This was Scott's old blog.
Wow.
I mean, if you look at this, like we're still talking about Borland, right? Like,
yeah.
This was the genesis of the blogosphere. Like people don't realize like what that was like. Now everybody does it on social media and stuff like that, but people kind of rolled their own. They had their own independent different sites. There was RSS to tie it together. And it was just a different world then. And if you kind of go back, I'll go back here and you'll see kind of you had your blog roll, which I don't think I had much people in there. But these are my categories. Frank's World Updates, good idea, bad idea, nerdy stuff, oddness, politics, and humor. Because really, they're kind of the same thing. And random thoughts. So we'll go back. We'll go back and we'll dig through this. And so it was kind of what was really excited was Microsoft was doing these developer days, and this was Dev Days 2004, and this was my first kind of Microsoft event that I went to, and let's see what that looks like.
That's bold. Clicking it live.
I know. So I remember driving to this with a guy I worked with, and I tagged him in the post, Senthil, and we were driving to New York. So we worked together out of. We were both consultants at KPMG at the time, and we drove into Manhattan for this. It was like somewhere down in Soho. It's funny what you remember. You know what I mean? Like it was just like I want to get my blog up and running before this event. So, and this was before you could get at the time, I was still covering psychologically and financially from the 9/11 and kind of the post extended
Yeah.
unemployment time. And what was interesting was I remember like looking at a hosting plan on my own to get, and it was really prohibitively expensive to get a .NET one at the time. So I just like, you know what? I'm going to put my own server in my basement. And that's what I did.
Yeah.
And it was an interesting experience. It was definitely showed that I, as a single person entrepreneur as I was at the time, the cloud is something I totally could have used at the time. As
Yeah.
soon as I
Yeah.
could, I dropped my own server. It was about when I moved to Richmond, actually, because I was like,
Mm.
I can't manage the server there. My internet where I
Yeah.
lived in Richmond wasn't as reliable. But it's funny how this is a trip down memory lane, and some of these names are still very prominent. Andrew Brust
Yeah.
is still very prominent. Doug
Yep.
Seven, Stephen Forte. I remember just going to this event and being transfixed, and it was quite a. I think I even have a review of it. Where is it? There's my trip report from Dev Days 2004.
Nice.
And it is pretty brave submitting this. Oh yeah, Whidbey. Who remembers that code name? And I remember they were giving out swag, and it was just a fun time. It takes me back. And but yeah.
Was it .NET 2004 though,
No,
or was it 2005?
I think
Would
it
be.
became 2005.
I think you're right.
It was they were optimistic. So I remember this to this day.
Yeah.
The speaker, and I forget who the speaker was, but I said, "Will it be?" Because everybody wanted our hands on, Whidbey, and they did have early bits, and they were very early bits, and I was like, "Well, when's it coming out?" And he goes, "Well, sometime this year." And keep in
Right.
mind, he said this in February, and I was like, "Will it be warm out or cold out when it comes out?" And then the answer was, because he was being very evasive about like month or time, and he's like, "Well,
Yeah.
depends on the hemisphere you're in." I was like, "Oh, that's a good line."
That is a good line.
And
Yeah.
I've used that since, actually. So
Yeah, I remember that. I was actually, I want to say I was tinkering with .NET before that. Like, I remember having to do command line compiles of code written in Notepad, I think at the time.
oh yeah,
This was
yeah.
a few years before that, and I didn't know what I was doing. Don't be impressed.
No, that was
I mean,
that was early .NET. And for folks that
Yeah.
are watching that today with 2024 minds and
Yeah.
eyes and ears, noses, and throats, command line was not cool back then. It was very much
Yeah.
an
Oh,
edge,
I'm sorry. Yes, I didn't point that out. Yes.
particularly in the Microsoft ecosystem. That was considered primitive. It's not. It's kind of different today, right? Where command line
Yeah.
is like, well, especially for developers, and this was definitely. It was a very alien concept to the Microsoft developer community. Command line was
Yep.
back then. And this was very early in the very early in kind of the .NET ecosystem. I think .NET 1.1 had just dropped, and both Senthil and I and a few other people I tagged in the post, we were working at on a project that was written in like old ASP or classic ASP, right? It wasn't even ASP.NET, right? Like, and it was just kind of like the .NET team was basically carved out to themselves and was like these two guys that pretty much did their own thing, but they were very protective about their knowledge. And that was kind of more what I was used to. So when I discovered the developer community, I was entrenched. And ultimately that led me down a path that, into the blogging and developing and all that stuff. And ultimately becoming an MVP myself.
Yeah.
Which I think is kind of cool. Like it's
It
just
is. It's very
it,
cool.
it's funny how this like tells a story. Like you go back in time, right? Like
Yeah.
and if we go, I'll have to figure out how to. And you'll even notice if you look at the URL, I had the domain name right, but I had to put it on port 443 because my cable provider was Cablevision or Optimum Online, whatever they call themselves. They did not allow me. They didn't expose port 80, and to do expose
Wow.
port 80, the cost would have been prohibitive.
Wow.
And yeah,
It's a good thing there's 65,535 additional ports available.
good thing for that, right? So so it's cool to kind of go back in time and stuff like that. And it not too long from now, Frank's World will hit 30 years of being online, which is
My goodness, Frank.
boggles
That's
my
pretty
mind.
awesome.
I like to say it's my oldest child.
That's
But
pretty cool. I was trying to
but
think of when I started blogging. It was, gosh, it was a couple years after that. I want to say it was 2000. It may have been late 2005, but I think
I
it
think it
was.
was because when we first met, you said, "Here's my blog address," because that's what people did back then, right?
Right, right.
There was no, there
And
was
that was late 2005. I had something up in earlier than that in 2005 because I didn't have a physical server up. Um, I'm trying to remember the technology. Yeah, I think it was Virtual PC was the name of the Microsoft tech
yep,
that allowed you to do VMs back in the day. So I set one of those up and did what you did. I just ran it on it was a big honking server. I had megabytes of RAM,
nice,
and
nice.
I used that to do my web serving from the house. At that time, I lived in Jacksonville, Florida. Um, but yeah, I did have something up back then. So that's I didn't keep nearly as good track of it as you did.
See,
But I
sometimes
do remember.
OCD can work for you.
Well, see there, if you put it to work. But I do remember I had a keyboard that the cable got mangled on it.
Mhm.
So I went in and removed the cable, and Stevie was who's 21 today was set up under my desk, and I gave him the
Aw,
keyboard and he would bang on it with me. We would both. I was banging on the keyboard too, and his stuff may have been a little more accurate than mine. To be honest, if we'd have captured that, but yeah, it was gosh those days I was working on my first book project, the Rocks book about SSIS.
oh
There
yeah,
were 10 authors on that book. Um,
and that's
I
back when
got
they
a
put
new
everybody's
laptop.
picture. Everybody put their big picture on it.
Right? Yeah, they put,
Yeah,
and the way they did it was they put, the smart people, the MVPs, they were to the left, and they put them in alphabetical order, and then they put the rest of us by alphabetical order of our last name. I ended up front and center, L being in the middle of the alphabet,
nice.
and I used to joke that it's very deceiving because it looks like I wrote this book and these people helped, and I wrote like two chapters. But it was an experience and very career altering for
Mhm.
me to have that experience. And I had just figured out I like to write. I made straight D's in English all the way through high school, Frank. I barely passed until my senior year. I had a teacher who reminded me a lot of Robin Williams' character in the Dead Poet Society, I think it was
Okay.
that movie. And yeah, he was a phenomenal teacher and really got me into stuff. And the person I had before that, we didn't get along. So the last few years in high school there, but my senior year was pretty awesome.
That's cool.
But yeah,
I
writing is
didn't.
we talk about it.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah.
Oh,
No,
I
no.
wonder, like the early days of what you call the blogosphere. I wonder
Mm,
how many writing careers that launched because I know that inspired you. I started the blog to build out my brand
yeah.
in the .NET space because one of the things that were I wouldn't say traumatized me, but was keep in mind like people talk about how weird the software developer market is now
Yeah.
post 9/11 post .com crash in New York. It was ridiculously the gauntlet you had to run through to get a job offer, right?
Mm.
I remember routinely 7 and 8 rounds.
Mm.
Um,
That's a lot.
one company was like, I was there so often, the security guard was like, "Would you forget your badge?" And I was like, "No, they haven't hired me yet." Like it was just very surreal. And then
Wow.
there was at one point there were something like 150 people for one position. One company
Oh,
told me.
wow.
And I remember they were like, I'd made it to the final 3 and then the
Good
final
job.
2. And then they only picked the other guy because he wrote a book. And I was like, I've always wanted to write a book. And I was like, and I kind of, I wouldn't say stalk the guy, but I kind of was like, how did he get to the book stage? And I kind of
Right.
reverse engineered how he did that. And the first
Yeah.
step was a blog. And that's how the blog got started.
There you go.
And I wanted to own my own domain because there were ways that you could go on the community blog that they had. They had weblogs.asp.net, I think was the URL. If you
Yeah.
remember that. And if you worked for Microsoft, it was blogs.msdn.com or something like that, or blogs,
Yeah.
something like that. And it was a very different era, right? Like now you would
Mhm.
just set up your LinkedIn page or your TikTok or whatever. There was no centralization of this stuff. It was all very decentralized. Arguably, it
Yeah.
might have been a better time, but
I was going to say that. I was going to say it may have been a little freer
it was definitely
than
a
it is
lot.
now.
And
Yeah.
not so much freer, but when you post on somebody else's platform, one, they hold the keys. They're the landlords. And if you say something they don't like one way or the other, or even a false positive, there was a somewhere where they had flagged our podcast as something like awful. Remember that? I don't want to say their name.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
we used to
yeah.
use them. We used to use them, and then we stopped using them for technical glitches that they had.
Yes.
And I don't want to name and shame them, but because it's not fair.
Yeah.
But
And
they were like,
the
they
funny
killed my
part is
account.
there's right. The funny part is there's like a dozen other things that were accurate that they could have fussed at us about. I make not a dozen, but at least a
No.
handful of
Well,
things
and
they could have keyed on, and they like completely missed something. I don't even remember if we figured out what it was.
so the guy, they wrote back to me. First, they wrote back
Oh,
the
did they?
usual.
Okay.
The automated response was tis tis tis, shame on you. And
Right.
then a few hours later, I got more of a hat in hand apology email saying, "I'm so
Oh,
sorry.
okay. I didn't
This was a
remember
glitch.
that.
No, it was a glitch."
Okay.
And
I don't remember. I don't think we did anything wrong.
No, we didn't. I think
It was like, okay,
it was like, where'd that come from? Like,
right.
and it was a glitch. And but I mean, a glitch can cause a problem as well as something intentional.
Yeah.
Like
That's
lose
so true.
13 years of blog data.
Right.
So I don't know. I think when you have more control, I don't know. Like it was a different era, put it that
Yeah,
way.
it was.
And
It was.
but I know a lot of people, it used to be a joke when I did work for Microsoft. There used to be a joke is when people move their blogs off of the company site off to their own domain name, it was always a precursor to them leaving.
Oh,
And there's like
wow.
7 or 8 names I could add to the top of my head that basically did that. And like 6 months later, or 3 to 6 months later, they were gone. So that always became like an interesting indicator of like, hey, you're moving off the company site. And I had a lot of pressure to put my stuff on the company site, right? And I basically showed my manager, here's the stats on Frank's World.
Yeah.
It's a known brand, and I'm like, I'm not moving it. Like, sorry.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And but yeah, it's been an interesting journey in the blogosphere in those early days. Remember Robert Scoble was a big inspiration. He ultimately created Channel 9, which was a cool thing. I remember very excited when that opened up. It was just good to communicate and network with other software engineers in the same space, which I think today we take for granted.
Oh,
but
gosh, yes.
In the early 2000s, that was phenomenally new, that whole notion. And big shout out to Scott Watermassix, who eventually did accept my LinkedIn invitation. Thank you, sir.
Excellent.
He was definitely ahead of his time in
Yeah.
terms of being a voice in the community, writing software and open sourcing it, which again, in the Microsoft ecosystem was heresy at one point.
Oh, yeah.
But I think the success of .NET is largely due to his project and other things that were open sourced and communified. Communified? Is that a word? So I'm very excited about just seeing all the changes over the past 20 years. I just think personal, professional, just in the
Yeah.
industry. I mean, if you had told me that, AI, I'd be writing and blogging and live streaming about AI, I would have been crazy. I remember looking into live streaming maybe like 10 years ago. And yeah, 10 years ago, but you needed like $10,000 worth of equipment to do it.
Oh gosh,
It
yes.
was not trivial. I
What
got
was that? What was that thing? Was it a TriCaster? Is that what that thing was called?
TriCaster Mini. They had it was revolutionary because you could bring a whole studio with you in a backpack.
Yeah.
And
I remember us looking into that and talking about it.
It was about $8,000, right?
Yeah.
Now you don't need it. I mean, like I joked earlier in the live stream where I probably should be using OBS for a number of reasons. But I like the fact that I could do this in browser because OBS, I love OBS. It just has a steep learning curve. And, when I think I want to stream, it's usually a stream of consciousness, no pun intended, stream of consciousness thing I want to do right away. But if I have to think, I got to set up OBS, I got to set these scenes up. And I do have like a Stream Deck and things like that to kind of make that easier. But
yeah,
I've actually found other uses for the Stream Deck. But ultimately it's about output, right? Content is king, right? And if I have an extra barrier between me and production, I know how that movie ends. Doesn't even start.
I'm like you. I've got the same thing. I just set it up, and then they did an update to the Stream Deck. I've been using it a couple of years. They did an update, and it like wiped out all of my settings. I haven't taken the time. It's probably 30 minutes to go back and set it in, and they actually improved it. I got the 15 button deal. And what they ended up with is making it 28 buttons, with one of the 15 being designated like toggle to the other set of 14. And it sounds like a wonderful idea. I just wish they hadn't ruined all of my stuff. And I have OBS, and I had it set up with OBS. So I would just sit here, just gently off screen, switch between the scenes and stuff. And that was actually very cool.
I need to experiment with that more because I'm thinking of all the to the things that people do with live streams. One of my goals is to get a PTZ, a point pan tilt zoom camera. So because there's one guy, I can't think of his name right now, Nick Nimmin. He's like a professional streamer, and he has like different cameras and.
Oh yeah, you can do so much with it. You can still spend 10 grand if you'd like.
Well, now you get right. That's true. I guess
get you one of those 8Ks. I think they're running for about 12 or 15 now. Last time I looked.
I went to the Sphere in Las Vegas when I was in Vegas a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm sitting there. What's the resolution on this thing? Right? Because it's like this 270-degree like movie that they show. And I'm thinking to myself, I want a camera like this. I don't know. But apparently it's a custom camera that you have to get.
Interesting.
Which means an 8K camera would be, say, 10 grand. A custom camera would probably be an order of magnitude or two more than that. So
at least one. Yeah.
Plus, then there's the other thing of where would I ever be able to use it? Because I don't have my own Sphere.
Right.
Pretty sure the homeowners association has something to say with that if I built one.
They will not approve a U2 concert, Durham.
You know what it is? I just need to get more land. So
that's it. Got to keep growing, Frank.
That's right. So with that, I have a meeting I got to run to at the top of the hour. But thanks for joining and thanks for celebrating with me. Let me know in the comments below what you think about 20 years of blogging. And I look forward to the next 20 years.
There we go, man.
blogging,
Congrats,
so
Frank. That's a big
maybe
milestone.
maybe there'll be like a Max Headroom version of Frank that will do like a live stream for me. That'd be cool.
There we go. A Frank bot.
Frank bot.
Actually, isn't there a Frank bot already?
Yeah, there is one on Frank's World. There's yeah. Or you're talking about one of the custom GPTs I made.
One of the GPTs I thought of.
One of the
That's what I was
GPTs
thinking of,
is yeah.
I think you've got a data driven bot, and it does both of us.
No, I don't have that yet. But what a great
What?
idea. No, I have a Bailey bot.
I thought you did.
I have a Bailey
Oh,
bot.
okay. Maybe that's what I was confusing.
So if you
Okay,
listen
cool.
to our show, our virtual MC,
Which
most
I'll tease. We have a thing coming soon. I'm still working on it. Frank's working on it with me.
that's
gonna-
yeah.
Yeah, there's a thing. So there's going to be more. Something we've been dreaming about since day one,
Cool.
but we're finally, I think, getting close to launching.
Cool.
We'll see.
Speaking of which, we'll hit season 8 of Data Driven sometime in the spring. Can you imagine?
Oh my goodness!
And it was about this time of year that we recorded our first episode with the guest that her name has been scrubbed from the internet, and we think for good reason.
Yeah, it's weird. We don't want to. We don't want to invade,
We don't want to fade the bots.
right?
But we did find
But,
out from a previous guest that she's still alive. So there's that.
Yeah, that was. I mean, it was that big of a scrub. We just didn't know. So
I want to know who she hired to scrub because that could come in handy.
that could come in handy at some point in the future. You never know. We want to disappear.
That's right. Talk to whoever she talked to.
Really?
It's like in Breaking Bad, the vacuum cleaner guy. Like she has like her own vacuum cleaner guy.
It was the digital version of that for sure.
The vacuum cleaner guy. So with that, I'm gonna play the new. Have you seen this yet? The new outro intro.
Probably not. You make one of these like every other day, don't you?
It feels like that. Yeah. I'm trying to.
Picking.
Pretty soon, I can
They're
just have
awesome.
Sora do it.
There we go.
Here's the new one. I'll show the new one.
Awesome. See you, Frank.